Welcome to this week's episode of The Savvy Author. I am literary consultant and your host, Clara Rose. If you haven't joined us before, let me be the first to say welcome. Each week I talk about all of the pieces, all of the moving parts in writing and publishing, creating your book for the world. And if you've been here before, I'd like to be the first to say welcome back, my friends. Today we're going to jump into a topic that you might not have even thought about yet in your journey as an author. Each week we talk about the different pieces and we maybe skim over something that really is important. We do talk about the 3 phases of book creation each week. So that's your brainstorm and blueprint, which is the first phase where we talk about analyzing your book, your topic, brainstorming and blueprinting your content before we ever start writing. And then phase 2, where we're creating and correcting all of the content. So that's putting words on paper, getting it edited, formatting, getting ready for publishing. And then, of course, our final and third phase is the one we're always excited about, which is publish and promote. Publishing that book, promoting it, and actually selling it so that your message is getting out to the world. So today we're going to talk about a really tiny piece of it that it sounds like we just breeze right by it, but it is super important, and that is formatting. We're going to talk about the basics of getting your book ready to publish. Now, it might sound simple to you. You think, I've already written my book, or I'm about halfway done with my book, and I've written it. It's in a Word document, or it's written in a tablet, which, by the way, if it's written in a tablet, it still needs to make it to a Word document before anyone can do anything with it. Now, you probably are using a standard size sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, and that's not how your book's going to be when it's done. In fact, when I have a brand new author, the very first thing that we do, if they've already written their manuscript, is we take it apart. It's usually in one really long document and really hard to work with, and it's the wrong size. So we're going to pull it apart chapter by chapter, because that's how we want to work on it in the rest of it, in the editing, in the formatting. All of those pieces happen when it's torn apart. So here's my question for you. Do you think formatting matters? I'm here to tell you that formatting does matter, my friend. Formatting, what is that? That's all of the inside pieces and parts inside your book. Now, of course, you won't be able to see them, seeing my book from so far away, but if you were to be able to look in my book, you would see things like a title page. You would see things like a table of contents. These are all things that every book has. Everything that happens in the front of the book, all of the stuff you want to teach them or say to them, and then everything that happens in the back of the book. All of those pieces have an order and have a way that they ought to look, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. Getting it ready, formatting it for publishing. All right, let's talk about the first piece of formatting. It is called front matter. And front matter is all of those pieces that come before your core content in the book. So what is front matter? So front matter consists of these items, at least part of them. A half title page, a title page, a copyright page, a reviews or praise section, a dedication page, the table of contents, a preface, and a preface is why you wrote the book. That's telling your reader why you did this. Acknowledgments, those are all the people who made a difference along the way. So sometimes an acknowledgment will say, and I always love this as someone who participates in the book, thank you to Clara Rose for making this possible, right? Because it makes me feel good about having helped them bring a dream to life. But it could be thank you to my husband who, let me stay up 5 nights a week for 3 extra hours after he went to bed so that I could get my book written, or thank you to my mom, or thank you to my editor, whoever it was that made a difference. Those are the acknowledgments. And then, of course, your prologue, should you choose to have a prologue. Not everyone does. A prologue gives background. It gives context to the story, perhaps. In nonfiction, I don't see it as much, but in fiction, it's often there. It's just background setting, right? You might talk about the characters. You might talk about, the setting, some of those things. That's a prologue. And then, of course, finally, an introduction is a great part. And the introduction is how to use this material, what to expect when you're consuming it. Now, as you might have guessed, that's not necessarily a fiction thing. That's more of a nonfiction thing. And of course, I have a savvy tip for you about your front matter, and that is front matter options are optional, but how you use them and where you use them are not optional. Here's what I mean by that. A half title page, for instance, is optional. Not every book has a half title page, but you can use a half title page. So some of the ways that people use half title pages are for spacing in a book. If your pages don't land exactly right the way you want them, you could put a half title page which sits in front of your primary title page. That's where your title, your subtitle, and your author byline goes. It goes in front of that page, and it's literally just a title. It's called the half title page because some stuff's missing, right? There's no subtitle and there's no author byline on it. It's just the title of the book. And it's purely used for spacing. If you need an extra page to fall in there somewhere, that's what it's for. Keeping in mind that every time you add a page, you really are adding a page, its backside, and then its counterpart page as well. So you're really adding 4 pages when you add a page. So something to keep in mind, but it's purely for keeping those things how you want them, right? If you had a specific page count in mind, or those are the reasons we use a half title page. Other than that, it's stylistic. You can choose to use it, you can not choose to use it. Everybody, of course, does have a title page. Let's look at some of the things that everybody has most of the time. In the front matter section, that is. Okay, so in your front matter, include the options that make sense for your project. Not all of them might make sense for your project. We talked a little bit about the half title page. That's a totally up to you page. Your title page, which is your book title, your subtitle, and your author's name, absolutely. And then everyone gets a copyright page. The copyright is the page that tells people who published this, the name of the publishing house, the name of the editor sometimes. Sometimes you'll see things like who gets credit for the cover of the book. You might see things like what edition this is, and then, of course, we've talked about this more than once, but your barcode, your ISBN number, that creates the barcode at the back of your book. This is that lovely little thing where they scan it at the bookstore. So on all of your groceries as well. It tells the computer what book it is. This number is assigned to your book for life. Everyone gets a unique number, and it's assigned to that one book. For instance, this book, my last book, 8 Ways to Mind Your Own Business, it has its own ISBN. There is an ebook version of this, which also has its own ISBN. And we're currently working on an audio version which won't have either of those numbers assigned to it because it's audio. So it's really an indicator. It's an international indicator that it belongs to this one book. On the back cover, it's in a format that is scannable for computers who are selling it. On your copyright page, it's just the number printed in the front. And this one's important. It's on the back side of your title page. Your title page always lands on a right-hand page, always. Your half title page always lands. Think about it when you open a book. The right-hand page is where everything starts, right? So when you're looking at your title page, it's on the right-hand side. The back of your title page on the left-hand side, that's where your copyright goes. Now, that's different than most of the rest or all of the rest of your front matter. So that one's important to remember. Now, if you put it in the wrong place, is the world going to end? Probably not. If you put it in the wrong place, will a publisher object? They might move it on you. If you're going to self-publish and you accidentally put it in the wrong place, is anybody going to notice but me? Well, maybe not. Maybe people who write books or publish books are going to notice, but the world in general, not going to notice. But that's where it belongs. All of the others land on a right-hand page. Okay, let's talk about the dedication. The dedication is different from the acknowledgement. Remember, I talked about the acknowledgement was saying, thank you to so-and-so for making this possible. A dedication is saying, I am dedicating this effort to somebody. So here's a good example. This is my latest author. Her book is live tomorrow, I think, and we're doing her launch. She'll be on the show in a couple of weeks to talk about it. So hers says, to my mom, dedication to my mom. You didn't have the life that you deserved. Love and miss you yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Her mother's already moved on, is no longer with her, and that's her dedication to my late husband, Tom. My life began when I married you. You will be in my heart forever. Love you always. This is her dedication. The hours and hours and hours that it takes to write a book, edit a book, get it ready, format it, and publish it. She dedicated that effort to people that she loved. Doesn't have to be done in that way, but that's usually how you see a dedication done. Okay, so dedication comes in your book prior to the table of contents. So this is all like leading up to the content of your book, right? So most people will not even read it. They just like cruise right on by it. I like to look at the copyright page because I'm curious. Who printed this? Where is it being printed? When did it come out? What version is this? That's totally a book nerd thing. And if that's you, you probably know where to find that. But everything else, people tend to just cruise by. Now, in this instance, Life in the Shadow of Mr. C, people who know, this is an autobiography, people who know her story, family, friends, those people, they're going to stop and read the dedication, right? But beyond that, people may not bother to read the dedication. When I wrote this book, I dedicated it to Larry, my husband and friend, who's my biggest fan and supporter, because he truly is. And he, of course, is not deceased or anything, but I wanted him to know that I appreciate his support. That's where the dedication happens before the table of contents. That really signals, table of contents really signals this is where the book starts. I wish I could show them to you, but I just can't on the show. This is where the book really starts. All of those things are front matter. You may or may not have heard that term before, but it just means this comes before the good stuff, the meat and potatoes, the core content. Let's talk about your core content. It's called body matter. I like to call it your core content because it makes sense to my authors when I'm talking to them. But in general, it's called body matter. Sometimes people call it core content like I do. But it includes all of the content between the front matter and the back matter of the book. That seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Front matter, back matter, body matter. It's all the good stuff in the middle. It's where you tell your story or teach your lesson or impart your knowledge, whatever it is you're trying to do with your book. That's happening in the body matter. And of course, my savvy tip for you is the style of the title, the subtitle, your chapter numbers, your starting letters. Those are all a choice. The only thing that's important there is that you're consistent. So for instance, you wouldn't want to start in chapter 1 and have the layout be one way, and chapter 2 have a totally different layout. You may or may not be able to see this. I'm kind of hoping that you can. See the two little heads here? When we wrote this book, we did this is strategy and mindset for the new entrepreneur. So one of these is strategy, which I'm backwards on my fingers here. One has a little brain, and that's the strategy, and the other one has a heart, which is for mindset. And when we co-authored this book together, it was about that, looking at both sides of being an entrepreneur. So this page right here is actually falling before the first chapter of each of my chapters, of our chapters. And it says underneath that it's chapter 1, and then it has our little logos. And then you may have noticed it's on our right-hand page, because didn't I already say everything starts on a right-hand page with the exception of your copyright stuff. And then the very next page is where the chapter actually started. Now, we did that for every single chapter in there because consistency is what matters when you're talking about core content in your book. There's a lot more that I could say about body matters, but I only want to make just a couple of points. Your title page is an important page. Your title page needs to be title pages, not your title page for your book, but your title pages, chapter pages, are stylistically the same and uniform. Here's the things you need to know about them. Fully justified text creates a smoother reading experience. Sequential paragraphs can be indented with no spaces, but they don't have to be indented. And they don't have to have an extra space in between them. Spacing between the paragraphs and sections should just be uniform. That's really what it boils down to. Now, you may not have thought about it before, but when you have a moment, grab your favorite book or a couple of books off of your bookshelf. If you're like me, there's stacks sitting everywhere in your house anyway. There's some by the bed, some on your desk. Grab one and just have a look at the chapter pages and see how different they look and how varied they look. You can add an icon or not add an icon. I have a couple of them here that have some great icons. Whether you'll be able to see it or not is a good question. This one here, it's tiny, you might not be able to see it. This book is actually Different Abilities. It's a collection of letters that she pulled together from parents who have a loved one, a child usually, with a disability. And we pulled all of them together into this lovely book of encouraging stuff for people who have children with different abilities. So her organization that she created has a logo, and we use the logo at the top of each of the chapters. That was just a stylistic decision that we made, but it makes it uniquely hers. And then, of course, we did a similar thing with having a page before the chapter. This one happens to be her daughter who has different abilities, but each chapter has its very own picture, encouraging picture with a saying on it, and that's a common way to separate your chapters out. No matter what it is that you do, of course, it's really just about being uniform. If you did it for chapter 1, do it for chapter 2. I have another one that I'm going to show you that I can find it here really quickly. Not find it here really quickly. Hey, this is it. Where she did something that I really like. She separated them with a quote, which we can't see because it's too blown out. But each chapter was separated by a quote. Sometimes the quotes come at the beginning of the chapter right under the title. Sometimes people will put a quote or a scripture verse or something meaningful at the end of each chapter. All of those things are unique to you, the author, and decisions that you can make, and they make your content better for your reader, a better experience for your reader. All right, I don't want to run out of time. I just want to show you all. These are a few of the books that I have helped people publish, and I'm so proud of every one of them. I want to show them all off to you. I just don't have time. Let's move on. Let's talk about back matter. So we talked about the front matter. We talked about your core content or your body matter. Let's talk about back matter. These are all of the things that happen at the end or after your core content. It includes all of the content that appears after the end of your book. So those last pages. So the back matter sections typically include things like references, biographies, about the author, any of those things at the back of the book that are reference material, if you will. Most everyone will put an about the author at the back of the book. Sometimes it will have a picture, sometimes it won't have a picture, and that is completely up to you. You're the author. You can have your picture in there or not. Often there's also a picture of you and a short bio on the back of the book cover. Also a style choice. You don't have to do it. You can if you'd like. You can see here, they're tiny little pictures of me and Debbie as the authors, and just a tiny little bit of biography. The full biography, which is usually a page or two, lives in the back of the book at the very end. It's one of those things that a book connoisseur, I will call it that, when they're looking at a new book, trying to decide if they're going to read it, the first thing they're going to do is see the cover, right? So we know that needs to make the right promise, right? We know that needs to capture their attention. And then they're going to read the title, and then they're going to flip it over and look at the back of the book, and they're going to read this part right here, which tells them, what is this book about? They're going to glance at who the author is, and then they're going to look at the formatting. Isn't that interesting? That's just the way that it is. I'm not making this up. This is just factual. They're going to look at the formatting. I also flip to the back and I look at and I read about the author. And that could just be because of the work that I do, or maybe there are other people who are that way as well. You can send me an email, tell me what you do. But did you catch what I said that they do next? They look at the formatting. Now, they don't necessarily always know that they're looking at the formatting, but I promise you that they're looking at the formatting. Their eye is looking to see, is it easy to read? Does it flow well? Some of the things that are going to trip them up might be that the blocks of text are so massive, right? Your eye automatically follows chunks of text, right? And if you have this huge, massive chunk of text instead of smaller bite size, that will detract for some people. They're like, oh yeah, this is too hard of a book. I don't want to read this book. I, of course, am always going to read a snippet of it because I want to hear their voice. I'm looking for style, but that's not everyone. But everyone's going to look to see how it feels to them. They're going to judge how it feels, whether they understand why or not. Let's talk about the rest of the back matter, aside from the about the author, which I think is a must-have, but is totally a choice. Remember, I keep saying that. It's totally up to you what you put in your book. But let's talk about back matter in general. So back matter in general includes whatever it is that makes sense for you. So you could be putting a big bibliography back there. Of course, I hope that you're putting an author bio back there, and an index makes sense for some people. Now, of course, remember that they all start on a right-facing page like all of the rest of them. Your index is unique in that it is done in a flush and hang style. So here's what that means. In any printed work, the indexes are set in a style where the first line is flush left. There's the word flush in the flush and hang style. And then if you look at an index, you'll see that the references are then indented a little bit. That's flush and hang style. That's what that means. And that's just how indexes are done. It's so that people can quickly find something in a book based on the index. Now, in a fiction work, you usually aren't going to find. Maybe in a historical fiction, you might find something like that, but usually you're not finding those things. In a book that has a lot of index tables or reference material or grammar that people aren't going to understand, jargon for an industry, for instance. A glossary of terms might be something that you put back in the back, but those are all reference stuff. That's what your back matter is all about, is reference. Not everyone looks at the reference stuff. If you're a book nerd, you might look at the reference stuff more, but in general, not everybody does that. But it's still important to include those pieces if your book warrants it. Okay. And lastly, before I'm out of time completely, is everything matters, my friend. Your book consists of front matter, body matter, and back matter, but don't forget to consider all of the other pieces because they matter too. Things like your margins being correct, choosing a font size and style that's easy to read and looks clean and good. Mirrored margins, that's something that not everyone understands, but when you look at a book, you may or may not notice that they look like the inside margins are the same as the outside margins, but they really are larger because of the binding, right? So this binding in your perfect bound book takes up space on the page, so you have to have mirrored margins. Your inside margins must be larger than your outside margins or your book doesn't look right. If you've ever picked up a book and you couldn't even, it's like, I can't even get down and read these things. It's somebody didn't set up the mirrored margin correctly. And that's what I'm talking about, is the mirror. Super important that that's done correctly. Then, of course, book size. Books come in just tons of different sizes, but understanding the importance of the book size is really valuable. For instance, this is like a standard 5x8, 6x9, which So Alive After 55 we did in a 6x9 because we wanted to do a larger print because it's for people who are over 55, right? So we went with a larger print for them, and we went with a larger book for them, easy for them to read, and it just made good sense. This one right here, we went with a 5x8 because these two sizes we knew are available for expanded distribution. So you may or may not know what that is, but it's super important that when your book is published, that bookstores beyond Amazon can find your book. And the only way that happens is if your book is on the expanded distribution list. One of the things I talk about in the Savvy Author program, if you're needing some help with this process. Okay, my Savvy tip, and then we're out of time on Everything Matters. While some things are considered standard, what you include is up to you. I know I said that a few times, but it's so true. It is your book, and you can make the decision about what you want to put in it. If you don't put a table of contents, people might notice that, but it's totally up to you, my friend. Okay, we are out of time for today, but I just want to give you a quick invitation. If you are in the process of writing your book, or you're in the beginning stages of writing your book, and you think, I need some help, I have a program just for you. The Savvy Author Mentoring Program is designed for someone who is trying to be a savvy author. The doors are currently closed, but if you would like to be on the wait list for the next session, all you need to do is hop over to clararose.com/waitlist and leave your name, and we will send out some information when it's time for the next class to open, and we would love to have you there participating. We'd love to help you make your dream of being an author come true. And I say this over and over repeatedly, but I think it's worth saying the savvy author, which is what this show is all about, helping you to be savvy. The savvy author is successful because they're strategic and intentional. So, my friend, be strategic, be intentional, be savvy. We all have something to say to the world, and if you dream of getting your books out to the world to make a difference in the world around you, we have ways to help you with that. I invite you to come back next week, same time, same place, where we talk once again about all the moving pieces and parts of being a savvy author. Thank you for your time and attention today. I'll see you next week right back here. Take care.